basically hooking your manuscript and hooking your reader. And from there, let's talk about believable characters. I'm going to tag Patty on a believable character. What makes your characters believable?
You know, you have to give them a personality. You can choose how much description you give them. But ultimately, you've got to figure out who they are. And maybe you've imagined somebody you've seen in a movie. Maybe you want to picture what actor you want them to be if they ever hit the screen. But they have to have their own personalities and their quirks and that type of thing. And so you have to let that come through in your writing. Because if you don't, they just become like stick figures, and then people don't get attached to them. And you want people to be attached to them. And attachment does not mean they like them. It can mean I like or I hate them. And people love to hate the bad guy. I mean, look at villains. There's so many great villains out there, and people love to hate the villains. So you've got to figure out what it is that people really want to care about. Do they really want to care that they're really, really bad, or they're really, really good? But if it's a really, really bad guy, you know, he can't help the little lady walk across the street. You know, he can't pick up the lollipop and give it back to the baby because it's out of character. So you got to figure out who they are and write from that perspective. What about you?
Well, you know, and make them a big fat mess. You know, even your protagonist can be a big fat mess.
Flaws.
Flaws. That makes them more real. That makes them human. And speaking of villains, Snape was one of the most hated characters in the Harry Potter books until we found out his backstory, and then we were like, oh, I love Snape now. You know, but you know, make him a jerk. He can be a jerk. He can be a womanizing alcoholic, but he stops and helps the old lady across the street, or maybe he saves the cat from the tree. He's got some redeeming qualities. Make him real.
But they have to have flaws. Flaws make them more comfortable, because if your characters are perfect, nothing bad can happen to a perfect character. Even Superman has a flaw. Kryptonite will kill him. So again, you have to have a way to hurt them, damage them. If you're making up magical characters, magic can't solve everything, or there's no purpose to the book.
Right.
So make sure that you think through those things, and that everybody has a flaw, everybody has a weakness. And you can't just think that they have a weakness in your mind. You've got to know what that is, and you've got to impart that, because somebody's going to have to use that weakness against them, and people are going to be trying to figure out that weakness. Because that's how you start to build that belief in the book, and how you make them fallible, and how you create tensions and problems.
Maybe your character's a villain. What made him become that way? What happened? Was he abused in the orphanage as a child? What happened to make him become that way, so mean and hateful?
You know, even great big monsters have to have fallacies. I mean, think about the things like in Star Wars, where you had the big walking robots on the long legs. Well, they wrapped ropes around them, tripped them over. So their height gave them abilities to do things, but made them fallible. It doesn't matter if it's a monster, if it's a robot with a short fuse and self-destruct button, they've got to have something. Trolls freeze and turn to concrete in sunlight.
And you need to know your characters. The reader doesn't have to know everything about your character that you do, but in order for you to write a good, rounded character, you need to know them and understand them.
And some of that, guys, will come out as you start to write. Don't sit down and go, okay, I have to draft down all my characters, and then I can start my story. No, start your story. Let it take you, but then as you kind of see where your characters are going, keep notes on them. What are they like? Do they have brown hair, blue eyes? Are they hot pink? What is it? You need to kind of keep up with who they become, and then figure out how to weave that back in. How do you build that soft, tender touch, that he cares for the girl. Maybe he plays with the curl in her hair, or he always takes his hand and rubs it on her face, and that's how he says, I love you. Maybe he can't talk. So you've got to figure out how they interact with others as well. And so keeping up with those traits will help you as you get through the book, because at some point you need to go back and go, we need to have that tender moment again, or I need to have that really tense moment, and what do they look like when they're angry? Or what did I write down that I kept up with that happened earlier?
And don't have your tertiary characters be cardboard.
Right, they need
So
to have just as much
they got to buy a
personality.
newspaper. Give the newspaper person a limp, a scar, gray hair, young, old, green, purple, but give them something that identifies them as a character with a backstory. You don't have to tell it. You don't have to tell it, but it just makes it more interesting. Have a little fun, have a little diversity, and stay true to, and everything you do should be fitting the atmosphere of your story. So, we'll pick on Blade Runner again. Blade Runner is a gritty story that takes place a lot of times at night, because that's generally when these police officers do their work, is at night. So it's gritty, it's dark, it's raining, it's, all the characters that you meet are nighttime characters. You don't meet any happy daytime delivery people. You meet after dark people. If your story takes place in the corporate world, frightening enough, I have a vampire novel that takes place in the corporate world. There's a lot of accounting meetings, there's a lot of, ooh, how could that be interesting? Well, you try living forever and try not to get caught. That takes accounting. It's just like, oh.
It does.
Yeah, you
You gotta figure out how they support themselves when they're running around the world doing stuff.
you can't be 200 or 300 years old and getting away with murder all the time. But stay true to your book. Everything in your book should be adding that little bit of flavor to the overall effect. So we can stay out of the cardboard, make them there, and because we're talking about the overall effect, we're going to slide over to show, don't tell. This is where I'm going to give you a free MFA lesson. I'm going to tell you to write down 2 words. It's going to be the last time I ever tell you I want you to write them. Was and were.
Yes.
Now, never use them again.
Use sparingly.
Yes, there's times you need them.
You have to.
But if you have a 5-sentence paragraph and you have 14 was's in that 5-sentence paragraph,
No.
no ma'am, you're
No.
gonna get chunked.
And I will tell you from experience, so, again, right, doesn't matter how many was's and wers you put in there.
You
Okay?
can take them
Right.
later.
Then go back and read it through. And if you're struggling to figure out how to write it without using so many was and wers, find somebody, find a publisher, find a friend that's an author, go to a writing group and say, how could I rewrite this paragraph? And let somebody give you one example of how to rewrite a couple of sentences. It will open up your eyes to looking and thinking differently. If you don't have that available, go pick up any other book in that genre, 2 or 3, and just read random paragraphs. And see how they're talking about things without using the was's and wers. It'll help you think about how to rewrite.
They're non-visual words. So if Bob was walking down the street, what do we know about Bob?
Walk on the street.
Not a lot, okay? Bob Samba'd down the street.
He's probably happy.
He's having a pretty good day.
Strolling down the street, Bob kept tapping on the glass doors.
You know,
Why? Now you
Bob's
got,
a wacko.
he's wacko. He's got something weird going on. Now you're really hooked. I gotta figure out what Bob was doing.
Bob trudged slowly down the hot, dry sidewalk. Well, that got visual, didn't it? There you go. So choose your words carefully. Stay out of wasn't and words. Stay out of non-visual descriptions. So show me, don't tell me.
Or another way to do it, watch out for your look and feel. You can find stronger words as well.
Yes.
An example was my lawn was covered in leaves. The wind covered my lawn in leaves. And you don't have that was, and you get a better visual of what happens. And
don't
watch your
forget-
LY words
Yeah,
too.
and don't forget, it's more than just vision. It's more than just vision.
All right, you want to use all your senses. Smell. Don't just say, if you're at the beach, it's not just the sun beat
It's not
down
just a
on
sunny
me.
day.
I didn't, describe the feel of the sand beneath your feet. Did you smell suntan lotion? Use all the senses.
Was there dead fish on the beach, and so what did that do to your senses?
Right.
Does your character like the ocean or not? It's always fun to have the one going, wee, the sand, the salt, the spray, and the other one going, God, it stinks down here. I hate being here. Why am I here? A little contradiction is never a bad thing. showing, fresh baked bread. True story. Walking through midnight dark alleys of Midtown Memphis, Tennessee. And suddenly you hear a fan and there's this huge rush of fresh baked bread. Very non sequitur, isn't it? But it actually happens, because guess what's in Midtown?
Bakeries.
The Wonder Bread Bakery. And when they pull the bread out of the oven and they turn on the exit vents, wow, it smells really good in downtown Memphis for a few minutes.
That's the best place to be.
And then you get mugged.
There you go.
But you smell good.
Another, like, in one of my books, throughout the series, so one of her traits was she doesn't like the cold. She hates the cold. She keeps ending up in the cold. And so actually I was writing this last night, she's in another scene where she's on a mountain and it's cold and it's snowing and she's like, why can the bad guy never be in the tropics? Why does it always have to be cold? I hate the cold. And so it's that, how do you take that trait of I don't like and build out that sense and put that humor in all in one easy thing, because she doesn't like it.
And it keeps your voice moving. That keeps you from doing a lot of data dumping. Y'all know what I mean by data dumping? All right, data dumping is when we have to explain something, AKA read anything like The Hunt for Red October. Half of the book is a manual
Yes.
on how to build the submarine.
Well, he tends to be that way on every.
Well, yeah, he takes a tech manual and weaves in a small mystery, and somebody shoots somebody. There you go. But data dumping is when you're like, okay, well, how are we going to catch Al Capone on taxes? Well, you need to have a scene, not a dialogue. Okay, look, Kelso, let me explain this to you one more time. If they break in here, then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, and that's why you're going to be locked in the safe when they, so you can go through, but you need to make it an interaction, not just this passive.
Right.
Okay, and here's what's going to happen, blah, 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 blah. Sherlock Holmes is a great example of how to avoid that. Sherlock Holmes is the master of, oh, Watson, you didn't get it, did you? What did I miss? What did I miss? That'll automatically solve a lot of your passive voice, your data dumping, a lot of where we say the story drags. You can avoid a lot of that by having a sidekick or somebody to explain things to. And again, when somebody reads it out loud to you, you'll know if they're having a conversation. How many conversations have you had where you're explaining something to somebody?
A lot.
15, 20 a day? Okay, same conversation, just put it in your book. Exact same conversation. Just a random person walking across the library looks at you in just exasperation and goes, I cannot find a book on horses. Oh, well, the horses are blah, blah, and that's, there you go. A lot of people get stuck on the details of a scene.
Yeah.
In the real world, do we get stuck on the details of a scene?
No.
You just kind of accept it, maybe shake your head. Because can anybody explain driving in Memphis?
That's a
we just accept it. Doesn't make sense, do we? Have you ever pulled up to a light and saw a vehicle doing something and you just went, I'm glad I'm back here. And because they do something amazingly stupid and they get away with it. And do you worry about the backstory to it and all that? You don't. You just simply accept it as, and then it's like I tell people when you're writing, sometimes it's just hit, stick, and move.
And don't get too long-winded with that description. Where you can, kind of make it quick. Either that or it's got to be more conversational. Think about that sidekick interrupting, doing something stupid, tripping in the middle of it, dropping something, so that it becomes a back and forth conversation. Because when the paragraph is an entire page and you're still talking, the reader's lost, you've lost them.
Yeah, you're
It's
losing.
got to be that back and forth.
You're losing the point of view. Yeah, and in mysteries, I'll look at Christy and go, in mysteries, the point of view. That moves things along a lot.
Yeah.
It does.
Because whose point of view are you talking from?
You need to think about that. Who do you want to tell your story?
And how often are you going to change it? Because you don't have to stay in a single point of view. Now, if you're a new writer, please just go third person omniscient. If you don't know what that is, that means you're God looking down, telling the story, and you know all.
Which means, from a very simplistic view, if you're describing, you can say how she felt or how she thought.
Jen Vanovich uses first person in all of her Stephanie Plum novels. These are also available to read. And they use the pronouns I and me. She's telling the story from her point of view. You might not necessarily know what the other characters are thinking, but she gives you an idea by a look on their face. She may describe, oh wow, he's really mad. You know, there's ways to let the story, the reader know what's going on in the other person's mind without actually knowing what's there. And then you have like first person peripheral. Let's see what we got. Well, a good example of that is The Great Gatsby. The story's told from the Nick Carraway character. He's very close to Gatsby. He sympathizes with him, and he has an emotional sympathy, unspoken sympathy for him. But he understands enough that he can convey what Gatsby's doing, thinking. He what's the word I'm looking for? He interprets well. He sympathizes with him, so he's able
Dr.
to.
Watson.
Right.
It's the Dr. Watson. You know, the Sherlock Holmes series is not told from Sherlock's point of view. Dr. Watson's told the story, and he's an integral part of the story. So there's a lot of gaps in the information that Sherlock later looks at me and says, oh, Watson, you didn't get it, did you? I knew all along that blah, 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 and he fills it in for you. Agatha Christie, a lot of her stories wander back and forth, different points of view, different personalities. A lot of these are, you know, quick, a lot of these are little short stories, quick reads. And of course, I love always to point out Edgar Allan Poe for atmosphere. The absolute master of atmosphere. You read any short story by Edgar Allan Poe, you will know within 2 paragraphs where we're going. You may not know how you're going to get there, but you're going to go there. You know, I think of, you know, easy things like Lenore, The Pit and the Pendulum, The Raven, you know, you just slide right into the story, slide right along. One of my favorite stories by him is not a really well-known one, it's called The Gold Bug. Interesting little mental intrigue, or The Cast of the Amontillado. You get great atmosphere, great point of view, great action, wonderful descriptions, absolute economy of words. Just the fewest possible words to convey the greatest amount of impact. The Vulturine Eye, The Telltale Heart. Telltale Heart is another great one that is just so very few words. But, I mean, it's a very short story too, even for Edgar, that one was only like 5 or 6 pages long. I mean, the Telltale Heart is just amazingly short. And, you know, you really believe this guy has completely lost his mind by the end of that story. So, they'll get you there quickly. They will get you there quickly. So, relax, get your writing in, get your story down on paper, and then you go back and then you begin crafting. So all this advice we just gave you, don't do this in the first draft. This is second draft. This is third draft. It's kind of like making a pizza. You're going to work in layers. So dive in, get the crust down, get the sauce on it, get some cheese in. Now we got a pizza. Now we're ready to go back and start adding, subtracting, removing. And yes, you're going to have to kill your darlings. Just because you wrote the scene doesn't mean it's quite the scene you need to keep.
But never throw it away, save it, you know,
Oh
you
yeah,
can use
you'll
it
use it in
somewhere
the
else.
next book.
Never delete it completely
Oh, yeah,
because they recycle.
Yeah, that's going to be the opening paragraph to the next story.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's always
Economy of words.
either a stack of notepads or notes or a computer file. Even for me, sometimes it's just at the bottom of the document. Sometimes I'll start writing this in and go, it really doesn't fit right here. I like it. So I just like cut it and paste it to the bottom. And then I'm writing along, I go, oh, here's where it goes. And I just go pull it back up. So never walk away. when I started book 16, the Takeoff series, I wrote about 40,000, 50,000 words, and then I said, yeah, I don't really, it's not feeling it. So I cut 40,000 words out and started back. I didn't throw them away, I just pushed them aside because there's stuff I wanted to keep in there. So not gone, just not used right now. They might book up back in 20 or 21, who knows?